Hi, my name is Matt Luongo, and I am the CEO of Thesis and the project lead of Keep and TBDC. I'm going to tell you a little bit about that last project. But first, I wanted to thank our organizers for having me. It's great to be among some great DeFi projects here like MakerDAO and UMA, and I specifically wanted to thank IOSG for the invitation to speak and welcome you all here today. So let's talk a little bit about DeFi. DeFi today is a $10 billion market, give or take, which I'm sure we're all excited about. The growth has been explosive, and while we're taking a brief pause from farming food coins, clearly we found something real here. So the question is, how far is it going to go? And one of the things that I quickly notice is that it can't go a lot farther the way the market looks today. So while DeFi is a $10 billion market so far, Ethereum has a market cap of only 43 billion. So you quickly see as DeFi devours the block space on Ethereum, it's also running out of collateral. It still feels like ETH is easy to get, but we're kind of having to look around for real world collateral and other alternatives. And projects like Maker need more collateral and are desperate for trustworthy assets. So there's an obvious one for me as a Bitcoiner, which is Bitcoin. So obviously, Bitcoin is quite a bit larger than Ethereum, quite a bit larger than DeFi. It's an obvious next step for collateral in this space. And over the past 6 months, we've seen that its growth on Ethereum has been explosive. So one way we could frame this discussion is, how do we bring DeFi to Bitcoin? But I got to tell you, as a Bitcoiner, I don't like that. Bitcoin is the first DeFi. We don't need your DeFi in Bitcoin. So, okay, maybe it doesn't need to be quite so condescending. Maybe instead, we can talk about how can we bring Bitcoin and Bitcoin users into DeFi. So not just the collateral and the liquidity, but an entirely new set of users that we can use to grow our market. So projects have tried before. Back in 2014, I remember reading about sidechains, and for the most part, they're still vaporware today. So in particular, two approaches that we have seen that have made it to the market have been this idea of federations or federated sidechains. The idea with the federation is you get 3 of your buddies together, you give them all of your money, and they give you script. They give you a token on another chain. And you can use that, you can buy and sell and trade with it. And then when you come back to them, the hope is that when you give your script back, you'll get your Bitcoin. Sometimes that works very well. It gives you price exposure. And frankly, you can put together incredibly simple implementations. So two popular versions of this would be, on the one hand, Liquid from Blockstream, and then another might be WBTC. Some people might argue that WBTC is a one-of-one, which is a fun discussion. But either way, simple implementations and price exposure. Of course, there are some downsides. And you kind of have to ask yourself, why are we in this space? If you use a federation, just a naive federation, your funds are no longer seizure resistant. Collateral can be taken, stolen by custodians, but it can also be frozen by governments, attacked by hackers. And finally, the reputation of the system is based on that of the counterparties. So if the people upholding the system are good, it will probably do okay. But if they do have an issue, suddenly you're worried about your collateral. So another approach that a couple projects here tonight actually represent is synthetics. And so the idea is you take a pile of one asset or multiple assets, and from that you can sort of create other assets. So you use a price feed and you say, okay, if you give me $10, then I'm confident that this token that you're giving me can represent 1 RMB, for example, because it's so heavily over collateralized, and I know that if you're being dishonest, the price is going to work out in my favor. So synthetics are great. In particular, you get censorship resistance again. So DAI is a great example where you have a US dollar peg And it's fairly censorship resistant. It can work with just Ether, as well as a variety of other asset types. And you get price exposure on the chain that's robust. So those things are great. Now, of course, there are some downsides. In particular, and I would never say this about Maker, but some of these other schemes that I've seen, they're dangerous. They can expose users to undue risk, all sorts of leverage, depending upon how the collateral is used. But for me as a Bitcoiner and someone who wants to get Bitcoiners involved in DeFi, the biggest deal is that you can't redeem and settle physically for Bitcoin. So it doesn't really scratch the sidechain itch. So what are my goals? What are the goals of the system that we'd like to have? Well, that's a censorship-resistant, fully Bitcoin-backed, one-to-one ERC20 token. So probably you would expect a token like that has the same price as Bitcoin. But the most important part is you bring Bitcoin from your chain to Ethereum or another, and you're confident that the token on the other side will always be redeemable one-to-one for Bitcoin. So how do we get there? Well, you take a lot of the ideas that we've been talking about from federations and synthetics, and you combine them with some cross-chain magic called relayed SPV. And out of all that, you get what we call a bonded multi-federated peg. So this is in the naming tradition of sidechains with a two-way peg. So what do I mean federations? In particular, I mean many federations. For every single deposit in a system like this, you create a new dynamic federation. And then the way that you prevent collusion from that federation is you bond all federation members with real on-chain assets. Then you use SPV to basically turn Ethereum into a Bitcoin-like client. So now you can read Bitcoin's history and actually validate, so if anyone does anything dishonest in federation, you know. And then finally, slashing and restitution. So I'm sure you guys are familiar with slashing from proof of stake mechanisms. But we're not using it here to maintain any sort of consensus. Instead, the idea is that if a custodian holds your Bitcoin and they ever sign something that you don't want or move the Bitcoin somewhere you didn't ask them to, you have access to their Ether via a smart contract and can seize their money. So not only is there this huge disincentive for theft, but you actually get paid back as a user in case there is an incident. So the downside of a system like this is very robust for user deposits, but naively, it's pretty collateral hungry. So you'll see here, there's something like a 2.5x system collateral requirement. Fortunately, there actually is clever use of bonds that get you down to as low as 1.4x. And the idea is, well, I'm not going to go all the way into it, but part of the idea is that you can leverage these bonds across multiple deposits as long as you know that different people are in each group. So our first version of this protocol that we call TBTC uses one of Maker's oracles, the BTC ETH price feed, and was designed and deployed for TBTC. And it's fantastic. It's I'd probably say the most trustworthy oracle on Ethereum. But version 2 will even remove that aspect and will introduce a priceless feed mechanism. So there's really not a centralized component here to attack. So that's TBTC. But since I first gave this talk, TBTC has gone from an idea to reality. So let me tell you a little bit more about its launch. So we launched TBTC RC.1 on September 22nd. And we're really trying to take kind of counter to a lot of DeFi, a very safe and graduated approach. So each week, more and more Bitcoin is allowed to be deposited. This week, the cap has just grown to 1,000. And then each week after that, it will grow by 500 BTC until 3,000, and then the cap will be removed. And the idea here is that we don't, like, as much as DeFi allows us to earn yield, it's dangerous for users to get too excited and rush and ape into a new system. So we really wanted to just make sure that the FOMO was kept low and that we could test to make sure that this was a really robust, trustless sidechain. TBTC is fully, heavily audited by Consensus Diligence, Trailbits, as well as an independent researcher, Sergio Delgado. We've actually moved to a quarterly audit schedule now as well, and we'll continue to publish as we go. TBTC is fully open source. You can check it out on GitHub. You can actually see all of the Bitcoin validation that's happening in Solidity. You can also look at all of the off-chain clients that do the bulk of the heavy lifting. So in addition to all that, TBTC is insured. If you want to deposit your Bitcoin in TBTC, you can purchase cover on Nexus Mutual. And the idea is that the mutual can actually basically act like sort of a version of insurance, where if you have any issues with your deposit and that was due to a smart contract bug, you can go to Nexus Mutual and you can get your funds recovered. So we're hoping that what we've built is positioned to be the #1 choice for DeFi. Since we started TBTC, WBTC has exploded, and it's been fantastic. It's really shown that Bitcoin on DeFi is something people want. And so now it's time to make trust minimized Bitcoin on DeFi something people need. So if you're interested in integrating, especially if you're involved in mining and interested in looking at things like USD and RMB loans against your Bitcoin without a trusted counterparty, please check us out. Go to tbtc.network/developers. I hope soon you'll be able to put TBTC in a maker vault and actually take out loans against it. Something like 2%. It's a great deal. And join us. You can join our Discord at chat.tbtc.network. We're on WeChat, Twitter. We're all over the place. I'd love to hear from you. And then, I think something that a lot of people are going to be excited about, and that I haven't talked a lot about yet in this discussion, is something that we're calling the stake drop. So in addition to bringing Bitcoin to Ethereum, we've actually open sourced the bridge, and it is completely permissionless. So anyone who wants to get involved and stake to actually run that bridge can do that. So you can join an event called the Stake Drop, and the idea is that it's almost like an incentivized mainnet. You put down ETH, you earn keep, and you can stake to protect the Bitcoin bridge. Finally, I'm really proud to say our community is just growing like gangbusters, and our incentivized testnet, Playing for Keeps, has already given users over 11 million keep, which is something like $7 or $8 million at today's prices. So if you want to get involved with that and you have some skills as a developer or designer or community advocate, please reach out. We would love to have you. And I hope you play for keeps. Thanks a lot.